Happy Jackson Jobe Day and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Tuesday, September 24th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White, and today on the show we have quick thoughts on each of Monday's standouts, only a 4-game slate, so had to get a little creative. I'm pretty happy that Jackson Jobe got called up, gives us a little bit more filling for today's show. We will talk about some injured players to stash in keeper leagues. Been getting lots of questions about that. I will once again put Scott to the test with a game of Guess Who, but there is only one place to start, and that is with a big prospect promotion. The Tigers are calling up the top pitching prospect in all of baseball, Jackson Jobe, and they are gunning for that wild card spot. Jobe will pitch out of the bullpen, so there's not really much fantasy value here at all for the rest of this season, but this is a really, really big deal. It's a really big prospect promotion, and somebody who, could turn out to be a fantasy ace when it's all said and done. 22 years old, first round pick back in 2021. This season in the minors, a 2.36 ERA, 112 WHIP, 96 strikeouts over 91 and 2/3 innings. The control has taken a step back this year, Scott. One thing that stood out to me with Jackson Jobe, but lay it on me, Scott. What are we expecting here? What does the arsenal look like? How much excitement is there with someone like Jackson Jobe?
I think he's the best pitching prospect in baseball, so whatever excitement goes with that, I guess would go with this. As you rightly point out, yes, the last week of the season, lineups have already locked for the last time in weekly leagues, and he's not filling a fantasy role anyway, so there's zero fantasy implications for this call-up, at least in the immediate term, and it's mostly just a matter of satisfying curiosity. We get a glimpse of Jackson Jobe in the majors now, and even though it's working out of the bullpen, I imagine it'll be working multiple innings at a time. The Tigers have gone with this patchwork rotation in the second half, even though they've been the best team in the AL in the second half and have put themselves in the position to advance to the playoffs. They've done it with kind of a mess of a starting rotation and not even a true starting rotation. A lot of openers being used, and so I think Jackson Jobe is going to latch on to a couple of those lesser arms, Cater Montero and Brant Herter. Those guys haven't been used quite like true starters. So that's the role I think that Jackson Jobe is going to fill. Maybe he makes 2 appearances the final week of the season. And maybe he makes an appearance in the playoffs. Maybe the Tigers surprise and go on a deep playoff run. And maybe Jackson Jobe will have a chance to capture the imagination of fantasy baseball players everywhere with the kind of impact he makes in that deep postseason run. It could be reminiscent of David Price getting called up in, how long ago was that? 2007? Is that too old for me to even reference at this point?
No. Go for it.
Go for it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's how things played out for him. He was, I believe, the top pitching prospect in baseball at the time. The Rays called him up to be a multi-inning reliever, and he made an impact as they advanced to the World Series that year. So maybe that's how this could go for Jackson Jobe. And if it goes that way, then he's going to enter next year with, I think, a lot of momentum in fantasy, a lot of hype. But I think more realistically, the Tigers get bounced pretty early, and he doesn't get a chance to make a real impression for next year. I haven't really talked about what his strengths are. Hard thrower, great slider. It reaches 3,000 RPM, which you don't often see on that pitch. His numbers in the minors have been pretty fantastic overall. He's had some innings that have limited his workload down there. Hasn't thrown 100 innings in a season yet. But he had the 195 ERA. He had the 195 ERA at AA before moving up to AAA and making a couple starts. You mentioned the control has been worse for Jackson Jobe this year. Yeah, the walk rate's been kind of high, and that was after issuing just 6 walks in 64 innings all of last year. He's gone from that 0.8 walks per 9 to 4.4 between his 3 stops this year. So kind of other end of the spectrum. That's a little strange. And even for as good as he looked at AA, 195 ERA in the 16 starts, just an 11% swinging strike rate. That's pretty blah, especially considering it's against AA hitters. So I don't really know what to make of that, but we know the raw stuff for Jackson Jobe is good. We know he's had dominant stretches in the minors. We know he's widely regarded as the top pitching prospect in baseball. So I don't want to nitpick too much. I think we're just going to I think we're all going to be watching him closely every time he pitches, and if he looks good, then yeah, it's going to be it's going to ramp up the enthusiasm that much more for next year.
And we did get a little bit of a sneak peek of Jackson Jobe in spring training, and there were a few times he was pumping 100, 101 miles per hour. I remember everyone getting so excited and, maybe even talking themselves into Jackson Jobe as like a stash for this season, for 2024. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition. He's only getting called up now. And that's exactly what this is now. This is a little bit of a sneak peek out of the bullpen for Jackson Jobe. And if he impresses, I think he was always going to be in play for an opening day spot in their rotation next season. Not that it's a guarantee by any means, but, if the Tigers are making the playoffs here or close to it, then I think obviously they will be pushing for that again in 2025. And Jackson Jobe is someone who obviously could help them do that. Hopefully.
There were 2 more points I wanted to make. I just wanted to give you a chance to talk because I felt like I was talking for 5 minutes straight. So one, kind of follow up on what you said. I think the biggest, the most significant aspect of this Jackson Jobe promotion for fantasy is that he is definitely going to be in the running for a rotation spot and presumably a rotation favorite next spring. When before, if he never got the call, he might seem like more of a fringe candidate. But the Tigers, like I said, they've had trouble filling all the rotation spots the entire second half. So I assume Jackson Jobe is going to have the inside track now, regardless of how he performs. Mm-hmm. The second thing is he will be RP eligible because that's the role he's filling. Ooh. That's how he's going to make his major league debut. So that's the eligibility he's going to carry into next year. And that matters mainly just for head-to-head points leagues, but it matters a lot in head-to-head points leagues. And as we've said a couple times over the past 2 weeks, not a lot of interesting sparps. Bowden Francis, probably the top one. But maybe now Jackson Jobe will be the top one.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, if he's up on opening day, very easily could be the top-ranked sparp heading into next season. That is Jackson Jobe, who once again is being called up by the Detroit Tigers, expected to fill a bullpen role. And last point here, we now have the Jackson 4, Scott. Chorio, Merrill, Holiday, Jackson Jobe.
Just give us one more.
One more. Is there anyone else? Is there a prospect in the minors?
I will not come up with it off the top of my head. If I search the name Jackson, there's a lot of Jacksons.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the complete list.
Jackson Ballmeister could be a thing. Mm-hmm. Tampa Bay. He's a prospect.
Jackson Rutledge.
I think that ship might have sailed.
That ship might have sailed?
Might have, yeah.
Yeah. It was exciting for a while.
Jackson Kawar. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen either.
Yeah. We might be stuck with just a Jackson 4. Oh, Jackson Ferris. Yeah, Dodgers pitching prospect came over in the Michael Busch deal.
Okay. All right.
The one. Put him on your radar.
Let's go. Let's get the Jackson 5 by next season. All right. Let's get into the rest of Monday's action.
I don't believe it. My.
All right. You hear the call. Mariners, big win over the Astros, and someone who helped them pick up that win, Julio Rodriguez, Scott, who all of a sudden is on fire.
Yeah, he is, and we referenced it, I think, yesterday, but just to dig in a little more here. On Monday, Julio Rodriguez, 3 for 5 with a double and a stolen base. And for all of September now, Rodriguez is batting .351 with 6 homers and 6 steals. And all of a sudden, his season-long numbers are looking pretty strong. Obviously not top 5 pick in fantasy strong, but here's where he stands now. 275 batting average, exactly the same as last year. 19 home runs, 24 steals. That's, he's played 138 games compared to 155. So the pace is definitely off from last year when he had 32 homers and 37 steals. But he's making up a lot of ground here at the end of the season that I think is going to put him at least in the first round discussion. He probably was anyway. I believe I had him 15th overall when I released my ideal first 2 rounds for next year. But 12th overall was Yordan Alvarez. 13th overall was Vladimir Guerrero, a couple of non-base stealers. And I'm sure they'll remain ahead in my head-to-head points rankings. They'll remain ahead of Julio Rodriguez, where stolen bases, they aren't essential in that format. But in Roto, in categories leagues where stolen bases are essential, I don't think I'd object to anybody taking Julio Rodriguez over those two. I don't plan to move him ahead in my rankings because I kind of want to take the approach with Julio Rodriguez, just given that all 3 years of his career have been so frustrating at the start. And what happened to him this year is, okay, he spent some time on the IL. He doesn't get time to make up ground. Even if you trust he ultimately will, it doesn't take much to throw off that timeline. And I think I want to draft Julio Rodriguez at a discount, and I'm not sure using my first round pick on him, even if it's a late first rounder, I'm not sure I'd consider that a discount. But if I can get him in round 2, I think I'd be thrilled to do that.
Mm-hmm. And it's going to be an interesting spot in the draft because, you just mentioned some of the other names. If you could pair Julio Rodriguez with Vlad or Yordan Alvarez, those are guys that are pretty proven at this point. Vlad's been a little bit up and down throughout his career, but for the most part, those guys are very proven and they're 4 category producers. And then you can get some steals from Julio. You could even go double bounce back and you can go Julio and Corbin Carroll together. And that could make for a pretty interesting start to a fantasy team in 2025 as well. Something that Chris has brought up about Julio Rodriguez multiple times is that before he suffered that ankle injury, he was coming on strong in July. If you remember, 375 batting average, 4 homers, and 1122 OPS in 15 games in July, then suffered the ankle injury, returned in August, and took him a bunch of time to get going. And then, here in September, picking it back up. Who's to say if we didn't get that injury, Julio would have just done what he normally does and had this monster second half. And next thing you know, we look up and he's at 30 homers, 35 steals by the end of the season. Not saying that definitely would have happened, but the way that, it trended in July and now it's trending now, I feel like it could have happened.
And that's kind of what I was getting at. Yeah. Is okay. If we're just presuming now the slow start for Julio Rodriguez, because it has been all 3 years of his career, April and May are just, he's not going to be much of much use to you then, but he's going to be so hot the final 4 months that it'll more than make up for it. What happens if he misses any time in those final 4 months? And that's what happened this year. And okay, he was still great for the time he was available, but it didn't make up for, at least not completely. It didn't make up for April and May, and plus in a head-to-head scenario that makes for a difficult. But you put yourself in a hole by having your first round pick be that unproductive at the start of the year. And I understand it's a big assumption to say just because it's happened the first 3 years of his career that this will always be the case for Julio Rodriguez. It almost feels superstitious to me to say that, but there could be actual reasons behind it. And I just want to be a little more careful than we've been the last 2 years with him. And so a little bit careful to me means waiting until round 2, and that'll be a great discount if he happens to slide to you there.
Yeah. And look, it could be weather related. There are some hitters who, early on in the season, it's not good weather. We see this often and we know the stats as the weather heats up as the season goes on, offense gets better around the league. But, we've seen with specific players, it's even more exaggerated. So that could be one thing for Julio. And the fact that his plate discipline, for an elite fantasy player, it's pretty bad. Like, it's not good plate discipline, and that could lead to some inconsistencies as well. And we've seen that so far in Julio Rodriguez's career. Player of the night for me is going to be Matt Chapman, who had himself a huge game, 2 for 4 with a triple and an inside the park home run, his 27th homer of the year. He is up to 96 runs, 15 steals, and a 798 OPS. Entered Monday as the 48th overall player in Roto, averaging 3 fantasy points per game. The steals really stand out for Matt Chapman. 15 steals on the season. He had 11 career steals entering this year. And, your immediate assumption is, okay, well, the steals have to take a step back. I don't know. 85th percentile sprint speed. Like, Matt Chapman is a really, really good athlete. It's interesting to me that it came all of a sudden now with the Giants in a year where, like, their team in general hasn't really run that much. Like, under Bob Melvin, they haven't, or at least they didn't early on. I haven't looked at the Giants steals, but I remember, like, early in the season, Thairo Estrada wasn't running, and it was kind of a Bob Melvin thing. But I'm not going to completely discount that Chapman could chip in a few steals next year as well. He's vastly improved his plate discipline. And I saw a few quotes after he signed that extension with the Giants about just how comfortable he feels playing on the West Coast. And, specifically in the Bay Area where he had some great seasons with the Oakland A's. And it could just be as simple as that, Scott. Like, you took this guy out of his element. He was traded, from one side of the country all the way to another country, from, California all the way to Toronto. And obviously, didn't really play up to his expectations there. Comes back to San Francisco, and boom, he's having a bounce back season. So I'm not saying it's all because of that, but I think there could be something to it, especially when he gave us the quotes.
There could be. There's a lot that goes into how Matt Chapman's career has played out. Of course, he had the hip surgery, the torn labrum in his hip, and I think that sidetracked him for a couple years, and then he made some bad choices in terms of his approach. He decided to start. It was a conscious decision. There were articles written about it, going the other way more, and I think that undermined his power potential, particularly last year in Toronto. And so with this move to San Francisco, yes, we've seen the steals go up. That feels almost like a bonus to me. I am more encouraged by what Chapman's done as a hitter because he's cut down on the strikeout rates, lowest since 2019, I believe. And even though his pull rate, his season-long pull rate is lower even than last year, it's a lot better in the second half. And we've seen his production improve in the second half. He was fine in the first half. He's gotten even better in the second half. And so I think he's trending the right direction with the swing. I am hopeful he can keep stealing those bases. But again, I'm not sure he needs to be. He needs to be a base stealer to be a top 12 third baseman. He ranks higher than that this year with those steals, but nobody's going to draft him much higher than 12th next year. And I think there's a good chance he returns on that investment.
Mm-hmm. And the expected stats, for what it's worth, they are right on par with everything he's done this season. So, expecting a 250 batting average, 25 to 30 home runs, 10 steals next year from the third base position. Those are pretty damn good numbers there for Matt Chapman, who has had a pretty big bounce back season here. Shout out to the Phillies, who captured their first NL East title since 2011. That happened here on Monday as well. And it's a fun week. I'm interested to see what's going to happen here, Scott. Huge series coming up for your Braves going up against the Mets. So we will see how these wild card and division races play out the final week of the season. Big thanks to everyone for reaching out to let us know the championships that you've won. Obviously, we love to see it. Keep it coming. If you won a championship, you listen to the podcast, please send us a screenshot, an email, whatever it might be. Love to see that kind of stuff. And if we helped you win and you enjoy the podcast, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple or Spotify. Let's take our first break, and when we return, we'll hit some news and notes right after this.
A Quiet Place Day 1 is now streaming on Paramount Plus. It's thrilling, terrifying. It will make your heart pound out of your chest.
Welcome back in. News and notes. Yordan Alvarez was out of the lineup Monday and later diagnosed with a right knee sprain. He won't be available for the next 2 games, but hopes to return this weekend. Right knee sprain this late in the year for someone who's had trouble with his knees in the past seems a little bit worrisome for the maybe the potential playoff hopes of the Houston Astros.
It does. I agree. And I believe I saw that he's getting an MRI.
No,
Did he
got
already
the
have
MRI.
that?
Yeah, they diagnosed him with a right knee sprain.
And that's how he got the sprain. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's a quick turnaround for a knee sprain this weekend. And we advised leaving him out of your lineup for this week. So fantasy implications aside, I think if you're an Astros fan, you got to be worried about this.
Mm-hmm. Francisco Lindor said he's optimistic that he will play again for the Mets before the regular season ends on Sunday, which is very ambiguous. And I just mentioned that huge series that's coming up. So my guess is the Mets want him to be in the lineup on Tuesday against the Braves, but obviously not a guarantee here for Francisco Lindor. Ian Happ has missed 2 straight with lower back tightness. Kenley Jansen was placed in the IL with right shoulder inflammation. Alex Cora mentioned Chris Martin and Justin Slayton could both be in the mix for saves. It was Chris Martin who closed out the game here on Monday with a 4-run lead for the Boston Red Sox. The Rangers are expected to place Josh Young on the IL with discomfort in his surgically repaired right wrist. His season ends with just 46 games, batting .264, 7 home runs, 4 steals, a .719 OPS. A career so far, Scott, a very brief one that has just been marred by injury. Josh Young.
Yeah, it has. And he's going to be an interesting one to rank for next year because we know he has a lot of upside in that Rangers lineup. I believe somebody had him as a preseason bust pick this year.
Is that you tooting your own horn?
Not to pat myself on the back too hard, but yeah, I mean, obviously he ended up breaking his wrist, so it's that's not exactly the scenario I was predicting, but it didn't go well when he was on the field. Maybe the wrist was never feeling right. There's going to be a lot of concerns about him heading into next year, I would say.
Tell you what, Scott, I was adding up my salaries for the Scott White Dynasty League earlier on Monday, and I have Josh Young as a $21 player.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm going to keep him. That's like right on the fringe, so I don't know.
It would be hard if you don't have a lot of room in your budget for that. I mean, it's a 24-team league. It's worth pointing out. I don't think in a 12-team league anybody's going to spend $21 on Jackson, or I'm sorry, too many Jacksons.
Josh Young.
Josh Young, yeah, one of those J names.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody's going to spend $21 on him in a 12-team league, obviously, but 24-team league, it's not that easy to get a starting caliber third baseman for cheap. So I can understand you having some hesitation about possibly keeping him.
Yeah, I totaled up all the salaries of the players I think I want to keep, and I'm at $261 out of 260. So I'm going to have to find somewhere to cut some costs. I just don't know exactly where yet. Bo Bichette traveled to Arizona this week to meet with a hand specialist. He's on the IL with a fractured right middle finger. A brutal season for Bo Bichette, .225 batting average with 4 homers, 5 steals in 81 games. One of Scott's bold predictions is that Bo Bichette will be traded this offseason. He also added to his Atlanta Braves homer. But I do think a change of scenario could happen and maybe even benefit someone like Bo Bichette.
Gabriel what it did for Matt Chapman.
Yeah. Gabriel Moreno hopes to return to the D-backs lineup as soon as Tuesday after an MRI on his left side did not reveal any structural damage. Dalton Varsho underwent right rotator cuff surgery on Monday. Blue Jays prospect Orelvis Martinez finished serving his 80-game PED suspension Monday and was optioned to the Florida Complex League. I think a name we could see in 2025. Again, that's Orelvis Martinez. Ryan Nelson is scheduled to throw a 25-pitch bullpen on Tuesday. He's on the IL with right shoulder inflammation, and Chuck Nasty is hanging him up. Charlie Blackmon has announced his retirement. Fun player. Scott had some huge fantasy seasons between 2016 and 2019. He was a first-round pick for some of those years and also has one of the best beards in all of baseball. So Man, shout out to Charlie Blackmon. He was a fun player.
Yeah, you saw on Twitter today going around some images from the start of his career when he was clean shaven before he grew that giant beard.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, it got me to thinking. If you're a guy, a professional athlete, and a decent looking one as he was, like, why are you hiding your face for the prime years of your life? That is a strange sort of commitment that I can't even fathom. I can't relate to that. He's a better looking guy than I am, but like I hiding your face behind a giant beard, that's all anybody can see. He looks like a different person without the beard.
That's true.
You look like Mountain Man with it. Okay. Like if that's
It's part
if
of the
that's what you
brand,
like, I
you know?
can understand doing it ironically for a couple years, but the whole like prime of your life, I don't get it.
The
I really
brand,
don't.
man. Think about to me, that's what came of it, right? Is just like people wearing shirts with his beard on it, or people wearing like fake Charlie Blackmon beards. You know, it's just, I don't know. It kind of created this cult following, I feel like, in Colorado.
Yeah. I mean, he met his wife and got married during this time, so
Yeah.
all's well that ends well, I guess. But like, I don't know. I don't understand that.
All right. You heard it here, Scott, anti-beard. I don't know.
It's not the first time I've offered that. Like the whole big beard thing. I thought it was a fad, but it's been going on for decades at this point. Remember, like I feel like Johnny Damon with the Red Sox was the first time, at least in a baseball context, anybody had seen that in a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back and look at images of Johnny Damon from when he first grew out his beard, it looks so tame by comparison. Like it seemed bizarre at the time. Like, what is that guy? Like, what is that? What is he doing? And if you go Google it now, Johnny Damon in 2004, I think it is. Like it looks like it's such a modest beard by what it's grown into in the years since. Not his beard, but beards in general.
Yeah, I remember Jason Worth when I was kind of coming up and playing fantasy baseball. That was kind of the one that stood out to me. That was a pretty massive.
Yeah, he took it to I guess he took it to that next level. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get into the rest of Monday's action. And we had ourselves a pitcher's duel between Bryce Miller and Hunter Brown.
It's time to duel.
Bryce Miller, 7 shutout innings, 2 hits, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts, 20 whiffs on 97 pitches against a Astros offense that had the 3rd lowest strikeout rate against right-handed pitching entering the start. Obviously, no Yordan Alvarez in the lineup. That is a huge deal, but still 20 whiffs on 97 pitches is a huge start for Bryce Miller, who over his last 15 outings has a 1.94 ERA and a .91 whip. On the other side, Hunter Brown, 6 innings, 1 run, 8 strikeouts, 17 whiffs on 103 pitches. And over his last 22 starts, you remember, first 8 or 9 games, 9 games, 8 starts for Hunter Brown. It was awful. It's like an ERA over 7, a whip approaching 2, just bad all around. And then last 22 starts, 2.31 ERA, 1.09 whip. Just a huge turnaround for Hunter Brown. Scott, anything to add on 2 names that look to be ascending pitchers in fantasy baseball, ones that are like on the verge of being like SP2s in fantasy baseball next year?
Well, did you give the actual numbers, how long Hunter Brown has been dominating?
I gave last 22 starts.
Okay, that's exactly what I had. I'm glad
Yeah.
I didn't repeat it then. Yeah, it's Hunter Brown. I guess they're both kind of tough to figure out. In the case of Hunter Brown, and I don't think I'm the first to say it, it feels like there's a bit of a Mitch Keller thing going on because he's getting the strikeouts, but he's not getting a lot of whiffs. And that's kind of how things played out for Mitch Keller last year. We saw the strikeout rate go down this year. We've also seen Hunter Brown. He's got a bunch of pitches, and he mixes up the usage a lot, which is a very Mitch Keller type approach. So I don't know how you want to read that. I guess it probably, given the state of play for Mitch Keller, it probably sounds like I'm I'm slamming Hunter Brown here. I'm certainly going to draft him ahead of Mitch Keller next year, but I don't know. I might expect more of a step back than a step forward, at least if we're just talking about those numbers from the last 22 starts for Hunter Brown. And then as for Bryce Miller, I think he has a good grasp now of what he needs to do to be successful. Doesn't rely on the fastball nearly as much, even though it's his best pitches. He's worked in all these other pitches where it's not like he relies on any one of them very often, but he has such a wide mix now that he just throws in enough different looks off that fastball, and it works out well for Bryce Miller. He got 20 swinging strikes in this start at Houston. That's a lot. 3 came on a curveball that he threw only 11% of the time, and 3 came on a sweeper that he threw only 5% of the time. That is a high whiff rate on 2 scarcely thrown pitches, and I think it's working for Bryce Miller. So I think I'll be more excited about drafting him than Brown next year, but they're both going to be top 36, I would guess.
Yeah. I agree with Bryce Miller over Hunter Brown. And yeah, Brown is an interesting one. I hadn't, kind of dove into the numbers for him, but he has 9.5 K per nine on the year with a 10% swinging strike rate. So normally those two things don't line up. And yeah, going to have to do a little bit more digging on Hunter Brown. He does get lots of ground balls. He's done a great job limiting hard contact this year, but as we talk about, that's something that takes like years to stabilize and actually trust in a starting pitcher. So just because Hunter Brown did it this year, it was the complete opposite in 2023. So, will that remain next season in 2025 is the question for Hunter Brown. Quick thoughts on each of Monday's standouts. Aaron Nola, a quality start up against the Cubs, 6 innings, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts, 11 whiffs on 102 pitches. And notice that his swinging strike rate continues to trend down since 2020. 13.5%, 12.8%, 12.6, 11.8, 10.8. So just continues to drop for Aaron Nola, who, as of now, Scott, just kind of feels like an unexciting SP2 in 2025.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm probably fading Aaron Nola next year for the first time ever. But if that's what everybody's doing, then I don't know, maybe I'll end up drafting him some. We talked just yesterday about how I plan to rank Bailey Ober ahead of him. I plan to rank the Cubs pitcher, whose name I'm blanking on now. Imanaga over him. Shona Imanaga, yeah. And so that's probably going to push Aaron Nola outside the top 15 for me. We've made a lot of excuses for him over the years, and when he's when he has a whiff swinging strike rate verging on 13%, it's easier to do. But he's trending more like Corbin Burns is with the swinging strikes, and there are a lot more issues when he gives up contact than there are for Corbin Burns. So I don't like to see more contact for Nola. Yeah.
2 Phillies hitters that stood out here. Kyle Schwarber having a huge September, 321 with 9 home runs and a 1082 OPS. And I like this version of Kyle Schwarber. The batting average up from 197 to 250 this year. The XBA buys it. He's, changed his batted ball distribution. He's hitting the ball harder than ever before. So I've really liked this year's version of Kyle Schwarber. And JT Realmuto has quietly heated up. Last 33 games, batting .311 with 7 home runs, 24 RBI, and an OPS over 900. Scott, anything on Schwarber and Realmuto?
Yeah, Schwarber, I pointed this out before for him this year. He has not put the ball in the air to such an extreme degree. His first 2 years in Philadelphia, the fly ball rate, they were by far the highest years of his career, the fly ball rate. And that's why he became such a liability for batting average. It was his best 2 years for home runs. And we do see a little bit of the trade-off there between the batting average and the home runs for Kyle Schwarber. if he puts the ball in the air 50% of the time as he did those first 2 years in Philadelphia versus 40% of the time, which is more like this year. But I think that's probably worth 50 or so points in batting average, 40 to 50 points in batting average. I'll take 10 fewer homers for 40, 50 points of batting average, especially if you're still going to be close to 40 home runs, as Schwarber will be.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I agree. This is the change he made this year is for the better, and it'll make him much easier to build around in roto leagues where, before, you had to use a top 4 or 5 round pick on him. It's tough to do that. A guy who you expect to hit only 200, 250 is much more manageable.
100%. What a weird start by Tanner Houck at the Blue Jays. 5 shutout innings, 1 hit, 1 walk, 0 strikeouts, 1 whiff on 57 pitches. And he has been limited to 60 pitches or less in each of his last 2 starts. Those 2 coming after he was scratched with with shoulder soreness before that. So it makes sense that they're limiting him. And obviously the innings have jumped up quite a bit this year for Tanner Houck. First 16 starts, 2.18 ERA, 0.97 whip. Last 14 starts, 4.42 ERA, 1.38 whip. Scott, do you attribute most of that to just the innings accumulation, or do you think he just kind of pitched over his head in the first half of the season?
Yes.
All the
above.
above.
Both.
Hey,
little of both. The strangest thing for Tanner Houck this year was how much better his control was. Like, he was a strike throwing machine early on, and that had not been part of Tanner Houck's profile. Let me see if I can give you the exact numbers. The first 3 months of the season, so exactly halfway through the season, 17 starts. He threw 69% of his pitches for strikes, and the walk rate was very low. Since then, 61% of his pitches for strikes, and the walk rate, let me see, coming into today, 3.8 per 9 innings over the final 3 months.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest change I see. You could point out the strikeouts and all of that. That's not good either, but it's probably related to some degree. And I think because that 3-month stretch with the elite control is the aberration for Houck, I think in the long run, he's probably closer to the guy we've seen in the second half, which doesn't mean I think he's going to be a 4.42 ERA, 1.38 whip next year. I do think he'll be able to better those numbers, but I don't think he'll be anywhere close to the guy we saw in the first half.
Yeah, maybe it's a high 3s ERA, 125 whip, something like that for Tanner Houck might be the expectation in 2025. Chris Bassett's control has been off all season. In this start, 7 walks against the Red Sox. That is a career high for Chris Bassett. Only threw 52% of his pitches for strikes, and he has just been a whip killer. 3.7 walks per 9, by far his highest since becoming a regular starter back in 2019. He's given up more line drives, more hard contact. That's led to a higher BABIP, more hits. So just all of those things combined has led to this 146 whip on the season for Chris Bassett. Getting up there in age, Scott, I feel like moving forward, we probably just look at Chris Bassett as more of like a streamer for fantasy rather than the mainstay he was in previous seasons.
Yeah, I think he's gone the Charlie Morton route here, where he's in his late 30s now. He's taken a big step back control-wise, and I don't know that I'm going to want to have much to do with Chris Bassett next year, to be honest. Yeah, he'll probably be streamable at times, as Charlie Morton is. And I know Charlie Morton's roster rate has remained above the streamable level all year, but it shouldn't have. And we've been saying that all year.
Mm-hmm. And 2 final names, pitchers that went up against each other. Hayden Birdsong, a solid start at the D-backs, 5 innings, 2 runs, 6 strikeouts, had 10 whiffs on 95 pitches. I feel like there are pieces here for Hayden Birdsong. Each of the curve, changeup, and slider have whiff rates over 33% this season. His fastball has just gotten destroyed, and his control has been a huge problem. And look, those are things, not easily fixable, but the fact that he has secondary pitches that are this good, I feel like they're, there could be something there with Hayden Birdsong long term, and Eduardo Rodriguez kind of hitting us with the Reed Detmers from last week. Scott, 2-star pitcher recommendation up against the Giants should be a good matchup. 4 2/3 innings, 5 runs, 3 homers allowed in this start, and he was coming off 2 really good starts before this one. So bad start from Erod, bad first season with the D-backs, and maybe something there with Birdsong long term. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe for Birdsong, but I'm betting against it. I'm not going to be enthusiastic about drafting him next year. That start in Colorado where he had the 12 strikeouts and the 27 swinging strikes, we just haven't seen anything close to that since then, and that was nearly half a season ago at this point. So, I haven't seen him much to get enthusiastic about for Birdsong here. Rodriguez, he was the best of a lot of bad choices, and I think I made that clear, so I don't feel bad that he had a bad start because, you had to be in a pretty desperate spot to use him. I picked him up in one league and thought about starting him, but then I was like, nah, I better not. And so hopefully you came to that same conclusion.
All right, let's take our final break. When we return, some injured players to stash in keeper leagues, and we will put Scott to the test right after this.
Today, with the support of the NFL, a new playbook is being written. The National Gay Flag Football League provides inclusive play for over 4,000 LGBTQ plus players and allies. Here is a home with no penalty for being you.
Welcome back in. Injured players to stash in keeper leagues. We got an email from Josiah who asked, who are the best IL pitchers to add as speculative keepers for next year? And he added, these are some names available on my waivers. 18-team head-to-head points league. Yuri Perez, Shane McClanahan, Sandy Alcantara, Christian Javier, Lucas Giolito, Andrew Painter, Jordan Romano, and Brandon Woodruff. So varying levels of timeline, Scott, varying levels of skill that we've seen in the past from these pitchers. How would you rank those? There are 2, 4, 6, 8 names on that list.
So, just going off the top of my head here, I don't have a chance to review the latest updates for each of these pitchers, but I would say Shane McClanahan number 1, Sandy Alcantara number 2. They both will have had more than a year to recover, and good chance they'll be ready for the start of the season. And they're former Cy Young winners, right? Didn't McClanahan win a Cy Young? Or did he? I guess he didn't. I
feel like we should know this, but I don't think he did. Yeah. He wanted it.
Yeah, he was a leading contender for much of last year, but he ended up finishing, or much of 2 years ago, but ended up finishing 6th. Okay. Yeah. Cy Young candidates in the past, Alcantara and McClanahan, but I do like McClanahan more between the two. So those are my top 2. After that, I guess, I just don't think Yuri Perez is going to contribute early enough if we're talking strictly for next year. So Brandon Woodruff, though I believe the surgery he's recovering from is a little less sure what to expect from that.
I think it was shoulder surgery, right?
Right. Of some kind. And then Andrew Painter would probably be 4th. I think now that he's missed 2 full seasons recovering from Tommy John. Remember, they were ready to put him in their rotation, the Phillies, as a 19-year-old in 2023 when he ended up needing Tommy John surgery. So I think there's a good chance he makes a strong contribution next year. So what are we up to now?
I think the only names left are Javier, Giolito, and Romano.
Okay, so let's go through it real quick. Shane McClanahan, Sandy Alcantara, Brandon Woodruff, Andrew Painter. I think I'm going to go Jordan Romano after that. No clue if he actually ends up closing, though. And then Yuri Perez, Lucas Giolito, Christian Javier. I think Christian Javier had the surgery too late to realistically think he's going to make much of an impact next year.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. A few other names that were not mentioned here: Felix Bautista, Liam Hendricks, and Shane Bieber.
So Shane Bieber probably not back until the second half next year. Liam Hendricks, total long shot that he ever makes a fantasy impact again. Felix Bautista is very attractive. I think he'll probably be the Orioles closer from the start of the year. If not then very soon after. And I think I'd put him right behind Shane McClanahan and Sandy Alcantara from the previous list.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I will add with Liam Hendricks is obviously he has a ton of closing experience. We have not seen him be effective in a long time. I want to point that out.
And he's in his late 30s now, right?
Kenley Jansen is a pending free agent after the season. So maybe Hendricks is using the closer role. I don't know.
Maybe, though I wanted to bring this up earlier. You said Justin Slayton was a possibility to pick up saves for the Red Sox this final week.
Yeah.
I believe I saw that Alex Cora actually talked about him as a potential long-term closing option. And if you look at his minor league numbers, he's Rule 5 pick. If you look at his minor league numbers, you can understand why. Big strikeout rates for this guy, Justin Slayton. So that's if you're in a deep dynasty league, want to speculate on saves, Justin Slayton, not a bad pickup.
All right, Scott, are you ready to play Guess Who?
I am.
All right, here we go. It's going to be a hitter edition. So I've got 5 names and 5 clues for each. And, Scott, I'll give you the clues. You can blurt out guesses whenever you have them, but you have to get the player by the end of the 5 clues or else you lose.
Oh, can't have that. Did I lose on anybody last time? Usually make the last clue pretty easy.
Yeah, they do progressively get easier. I think
I needed the last clue on one of them last time.
Yeah, I think you got them all right, though. So
yeah.
All right, so let's jump in. A little bit of game show music here. Hey, all right, guess who? We are up. And very first player, preseason ADP was 37.2. I am currently 136th overall. Ooh.
Bad year for Mr. 37.2.
Yeah. I finished as a top 20 player in both 2022 and 2023.
Top 20 player both of those years. I don't think I'm going to come up with it quick enough.
All right, we'll keep moving. I got off to a great start, hitting 292 with 8 home runs, 4 steals, and a 932 OPS in April. Since the start of May, I am batting .202 with 15 homers, 7 steals, and a 607 OPS. Awesome start. Terrible since May. Top 20 player in both 2022 and 2023, and has fallen off.
Marcus Semien?
Not Marcus Semien, but your next clue is that I won the World Series last year and was the ALCS MVP.
Oh, Adolis Garcia.
That's exactly right. It is Adolis Garcia. And the last clue, can't confirm this, but it would make sense if Chuck Norris was a fan of the team I play for.
The Rangers, but I think I would have already known he was a Ranger from the previous clue.
Walker, Texas Ranger there with Chuck Norris. Yeah, Adolis Garcia. I mean, we've kind of talked about him sporadically throughout the season. The underlying numbers don't look that different, but it's just so crazy that he's taken this much of a step back. And he's 31 years old, so I feel like he'll be a tough one for 2025.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's... And I'd have to review the numbers again to say for sure, but I think he reminds me a little of Javier Baez in that he has to be, his profile relies on him being at the extremes in enough areas that it won't take enough of a slip. It won't take much of a slip there for the whole thing to kind of collapse. And I'm not sure what the thing is, where the slip happened for Adolis Garcia. And I'm not going to be able to go through all the numbers now to figure it out, but I think it's kind of a similar situation. So I I don't know that I'm going to be team bounce back for Garcia next year.
All right, next up, my preseason ADP was 93. I currently rank 71st overall. So, solid player, a little bit of return on investment. I am one of 12 players with 20 homers and 25 steals.
One of how many players?
One of 12 players, 20 homers and 25 steals.
Okay.
Right?
I feel like I should. Okay. I can't think of the name, but there's a player I have in mind. I just can't think of who it is.
Well, maybe this will refresh your memory.
Maybe.
I was on Scott White's Busts 1.0 for this season.
Oh, yeah. Well, sounds like that pick didn't pan out. A bust who wasn't a bust. He's actually outperformed with 20 homer, 25 steal season.
Very
Gosh,
quiet.
I feel like that 2025 thing. I feel like there was somebody I was looking at the other day. I can't think of who it is.
I was traded for Tyler Mahle in June of 2023.
Traded for Tyler. Oh, it's exactly the player. It's exactly the player I looked at just today because I was putting together my first base rankings. It's Spencer Steer.
It is Spencer Steer, who has quietly had a productive season. The batting average, not so much, 229, but 20 homers, 91 RBI, 25 steals, 738 OPS, not great, but he's an accumulator. He plays in a good ballpark. He hits right in the middle of the lineup. He plays every single day. It just kind of seems rock solid.
I don't know, Frank. My takeaway looking at Steer was I feel like he's going to be even harder to rank next year than this year. Because, yeah, the final numbers ended up in a good spot. He's hitting 208 with the 671 OPS in the second half.
Yeah.
And definitely looks like a better fantasy player than a real life player. And presuming everybody's healthy, they get Christian Encarnacion Strand back, they get Jamer Candelario back, they have Noel V. Marte available. I think there's still going to be that playing time issue for him. So he regressed in the worst possible ways, I think, if you were looking for reassurance from Spencer Steer's sophomore season, I don't think he actually provided it. He managed to accumulate enough home runs and stolen bases that he was a serviceable a solid fantasy player. But there are a lot of downsides apart from those home runs and steals.
All right, next up, preseason ADP was 31.4. I currently rank 142nd.
142nd and preseason was what?
31.4.
Oh, gosh.
Not
Not great.
I have turned in 4 straight 2020 seasons.
Is this Marcus? No, it's not Marcus Simeon. He hasn't had that many 2020 seasons.
No.
All right, never mind. Keep going.
The problem is my batting average has dropped from 254 to 221.
Oh, that's Randy Arozarena.
That is Randy Arozarena. Final 2 clues. I was one of many Cardinals outfielders who got much better after I was traded back in 2020. And the last clue was I got traded again this season. He is on the Seattle Mariners, of course. And Arozarena kind of feels a little bit like the analysis you provided for Adolis Garcia, where there doesn't really need to be a lot that goes wrong, just like a little bit on the fringes.
Yep.
And it could just go very wrong for him.
I hate this profile. I do. This profile is... I didn't turn into Robot Scott, did I?
You are kind of a little bit.
Oh, no. This is not a good day for that to happen. Okay. I don't like this profile. And I made the comparison to Javier Baez. Every year I would call Javier Baez a bust, and he wasn't until he was, and I feel like I've been on the bust bandwagon for Adolis Garcia and Randy Arozarena for a number of years now. I don't know that I officially had either on my bust list this year. I wish I did, but I've never loved the profile.
Yeah, I was much more in on Randy coming into the season. I have lots of shares, and despite going 2020, I read off 142nd overall. It's a pretty bad return on investment based on where you drafted him. Scott, how are we doing? How's the connection? You think do we have it in us to go?
I think we do. We do.
All right, let's keep on going. My preseason ADP was 146.6. I currently rank 87th overall. Pretty good season. I was the 5th overall pick back in 2019.
Okay. 5th overall pick in 2019. That wasn't that long ago.
Not too long.
Okay.
I am in the midst of a breakout season, 24 homers, 80 runs scored, and 835 OPS.
Give those numbers again. Sorry.
24 homers, 80 runs scored, 835 OPS.
All right. Okay. Keep going.
I had Tommy John surgery in September of last year.
Tommy John surgery late last year. A hitter who's gone on to have a great year. I don't know.
Uh-oh.
I don't know.
Do we need the final clue, Scott?
I think we do.
All right. Well, then I'm going to need a different sound bite right here. You know what they say about the team I play for?
Okay. So it's a tiger. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, it's Riley Green.
Riley Green, who just quietly, came back from the Tommy John surgery, was ready to go in spring training, and he's just had this breakout season. It's not, I say breakout, like it's not a huge season, but it's his best season yet. And it overall has been a very productive one here for Riley Green. Do you foresee ranking him higher than both Arozarena and Adolis Garcia next year?
Yes. He'll be higher than those two. I don't see him as like a stud, though. I think he's only 23, so I don't want to say he can't get better from here. But we haven't really seen improvement in the strikeout area from Riley Green, so I think he's going to remain kind of a middling batting average guy. And even though his sprint speed's decent, he shows no inclination to steal bases. Whatsoever. So he's kind of a one-dimensional player, and I don't love that profile either. But he'll be a top 24 outfielder for me. I'm fairly certain.
Mm-hmm. We don't have much time left, so I'm gonna quickly run through this last player in the clues, Scott. Let's do it. Preseason ADP was 108.4. I currently ranked 53rd overall. I got off to a slow start, but from June 1st on, I'm batting 278, 14 homers, 50 RBI, and an 867 OPS.
Okay.
My 605 plate appearances rank 4th among catchers.
What was the first clue again?
My preseason ADP was 108.4. I currently rank 53rd overall.
And he's a catcher. Is it Yainer Diaz?
It is Yainer Diaz. My 302 expected batting average leads all catchers. Next closest is William Contreras at 274, and I am ranked 5th in Scott's 2025 catcher rankings.
Yeah. I think he's awesome. I think he's the best bet for batting average at the position. Yeah, I think pretty clearly. And I think he could hit for more power than he did last year. We saw it in his rookie season. So I think Yainer Diaz, there's a clear top 6 for me at catcher. Cal Raleigh rounds it out. But it wouldn't surprise me if Yainer Diaz actually outperformed like Will Smith next year, because I think Will Smith has some playing time issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. I was skeptical on mostly the plate discipline for Yainer Diaz. He chases a lot, but he also makes a lot of contact. So I was worried about that coming into his second season, but obviously he has put those worries to rest, and he hits in the middle of one of the best lineups in baseball. So I think he's pretty much trustworthy as a top 5 or 6 catcher heading into next season. All right, Scott, you aced it once again. I think maybe I need to make these a little bit tougher for you.
I think they're the right amount of tough. I think it'd be frustrating for the listener if I never got it right.
Yeah. I also kind of want to stump you too, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
That will happen someday.
That'll
I'm
be
sure.
that would be a bit of a tough listen there. I wanted to do Who Wants to Be a Fantasy Baseball Millionaire, but
Oh yeah.
it just sounded like it would just take too long. I was trying to come up with like multiple choice questions and ask the chat as like a lifeline and stuff. Maybe one day, but I have the wheels are turning. I think I can.
Were you like 5 years old at the height of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire fervor? I was in high school.
When was it most popular?
Like,
It was
like 2000.
Yeah, I was 9, 10 years old. So
You're older than I thought.
Oh, thanks, Scott.
I was real into it at the time, man.
I remember watching it. Like
that was some must-see TV.
Those days you would stay home from school, you're sick. I don't know. I feel like they were just.
it was on during prime time in its prime.
Right. What am I thinking? I don't know.
It eventually became an afternoon syndicated show. Yeah.
Yeah, they probably
Regis Philbin was gone by then, right?
Put on
gone as in he no longer the host of the show.
Right. Yeah. Reruns at that point. All right, let's wrap up here. Some bullpen updates from Monday. We mentioned with the Red Sox, no Kenley Jansen. Chris Martin got the 9th inning with a 4-run lead. He gave up 1 run on 2 hits, but he finished the game. And for the Giants, Ryan Walker pitched a clean 9th inning for his 10th save. And I think he has a pretty good claim to the closer role in 2025, assuming they don't spend some big money on a closer in the offseason. I know Camilo Doval was great last year, but look at these overall numbers for Ryan Walker: 1.95 ERA, 0.84 WHIP, well over a strikeout per inning. I think he is certainly deserving of that closer role heading into next season. To stream or not to stream on Tuesday, we have Jacob Junis at the Guardians, Tobias Myers at the Pirates, Dean Kramer at the Yankees, Clark Schmidt facing the Orioles, Jack Kohanowitz at the White Sox, Jonathan Cannon versus the Angels.
Look, I'm going to take the Eduardo Rodriguez stance of I don't think you should actually start any of these guys, but if you're going to insist on starting some of these guys, Tobias Myers at Pittsburgh, Jack Kohanowitz at the White Sox, those are my choices.
And I will throw Jacob Junis at Cleveland in the mix. On Wednesday, we have Cody Bradford at the Oakland A's. We have Simeon Woods Richardson facing the Marlins. Edward Cabrera's at the Twins. DJ Hurst versus the Royals. Zach Littell at the Tigers. Some pretty good ones.
Yeah, Cody Bradford at Oakland. I feel pretty good about that one. He was my top sleeper pitcher for this week, and I sincerely hope that my top sleeper pitcher does not go wrong 3 weeks in a row to end the season.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap up with Team Name Tuesday, Scott. Of course, on a day where there's only 4 games, we're going to go longer than expected, but it's
our last too much fun. We're having too much fun, Frank.
Our last Team Name Tuesday of the season. How about that? These are from Ryan, and they are Bobby Witt themed. Witt t-shirt contest.
All righty.
Witt or Without You.
Yeah, you get the Yu Darvish in there too.
Darvish,
all right.
Yeah. Wit Hot American Summer.
Okay.
Cool HaWit.
That's a Family Guy reference to Stewie saying "Cool Whip."
Yes.
It doesn't really work without the H sound though. That's the whole joke.
Yeah. I started watching King of the Hill this weekend, and the way he says what is pretty good. Pretty fun.
Severely underrated show, King of the Hill.
I like it so far.
It's great.
Wit cat food.
Yeah.
Witter done.
All right.
Oh God, wit have I done?
Not loving that one.
Wit goes around, comes around.
Sure.
I'll have wit she's having.
A lot of uses for the name Wit here. We're discovering.
Witter's coming.
Yeah, that one's pretty lame too.
Yeah, the Witter Soldier.
Using it as winter twice in a row.
Yeah. Wit doesn't kill you, makes you stronger.
Okay.
And these are from Lisa, Simpson themed. Caminero! Hiya!
Caminero! Caminero. It's a great one.
You clearly did that much better than I did because I have no clue.
Yeah. It was the sport utility vehicle. I think Hank Williams Jr. sings the Caminero song on the commercial in the show.
Don't have a Cowser, man.
Sure.
Eat my short.
Yeah.
And hi diddly ho, Gabe Moreno.
Okay.
And I asked Twitter for some team names. I got like 65 responses. There were so many. So we'll do some rapid fire here. The Dorn Identity.
By the way, the sport utility vehicle from The Simpsons was Canyonero. That was the actual song. But when I hear the name Caminero, I always think, like, I have sang that Simpsons song to his name so many times. So I just want to let Lisa know. She's in good company. All right, back to the other names here.
Yeah, Twitter rapid fire. The Dorn Identity.
Okay.
Jake Burger in Paradise.
Uh-huh.
Scooble Snacks.
Okay.
Better Call Hall.
All right.
Stone Cold Gunner.
Sure.
Wu-Tang Clan.
Yep.
Gunner of 69.
All right.
Scuba Diving.
Mm-hmm.
The French Prince of Bel-Air.
Sure.
War. What is it good for?
The French Prince of Bel-Air doesn't make sense. Okay. War, what is it good for? Like the stat. Yeah.
Yeah. In parentheses for the French Prince, they wrote Ty France and Will Smith.
Okay. That's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Born Again Christian Yelich.
Uh-huh.
Stanton Room Only.
Sure.
The Book of Bo Bichette.
Classic.
A Baseball Carol.
Mm-hmm.
Fat Bottom Girls.
Doesn't really work with the pronunciation, but
Yeah.
it reads fine.
Shirts and Skeins.
Yeah. I think we've had that one before, but it's a good one.
I never heard this one before. I think it's hilarious. Brennan has a Manzardo.
All right.
You say goodbye. I say Bayo.
Yep.
And we are going to say goodbye to today's episode. We're going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning into Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.